Yeah. Surprise, a little different than you used to. Yeah. Dropping these bars on YouTube, knowledge I introduce you. Yeah. We chasing this money like it's the prize, it's the voodoo. Fugazi, fugazi, it's just a lie we buying into. We need some cars on deck. Get the rollies, get the Moe, all the Mars on deck.
All right, good evening, folks. How are we doing? Hope you had a good Sunday. Hope you've enjoyed a little bit of good weather as well this weekend. I was out yesterday. It was hot and it was chucking it down as we got back. So I thought today was going to be miserable. But we've at least had one additional day. And I don't know what the forecast for tomorrow and the next week is, but apparently it's not great. But thank you so much for joining me. This is a bit of an early one this Sunday, but this is effectively a finance clinic. So the idea is to make myself available to answer some questions. So if you do have questions, pop your question in the chat and I will be sure to get round to it and try and add as much value as I possibly can. I just want to give a big shout out. Thank you so much, mate. You liked it before we even begun, and yeah, confidence that there's going to be a lot of value for people who are here. So thank you, mate, and hope you're here as well live. Lots obviously going on this week. U-turn with the Bank of England potentially. I don't know what they're doing with the interest rates now, what they're going to be doing, whether they're going to increase rates on the 21st when they meet, and just no idea. It feels like commentary came out from one of the economists who used to be at the Bank of England and very, very well respected. He's the expert on financial stability. That it feels like the very next day, within a matter of 24 hours, Andrew Bailey kind of signposts that he thinks that interest rates are at their peak and they're not going to tighten any further. And so if you do have questions about this, because it's quite an important topic, right? Because ultimately there's the obvious impact on mortgages. There's the obvious impact on rent. That's the bad news. There is good news for savers because interest rates go up. But ultimately, there is still this fear that there is a 50-50 chance that the UK economy will go into recession because the cost of borrowing is going to be more expensive. And speaking to people over the past week or so, I think what we'll find in the coming months is that we're in a very difficult vicious cycle. And vicious cycles are already hard enough to break out of, but this one will be one that will be extremely difficult to break out of. Because typically what happens is, and this is based on data, we know that 1 in 4 of us in the UK has less than £100 in savings, right? So when you have your mortgage or your rent go up and you don't have that amount in savings to give you the ability to take on board that cushion, oftentimes what people will do is they will go towards credit cards, overdrafts, personal loans, some kind of debt facility. Well, guess what? Interest rate means that debt facility is now more expensive, which means that you're in a catch-22 because you can't quite afford the increase that you're going to be paying anyway. You're going to try and source it with debt, and that debt is even now more expensive. So it's a really, really difficult situation to be in. So I'm kind of holding my breath to see what's going to happen when they meet and what the next inflation numbers are going to be. Remember the forecast, and I'll bring up a few screens a bit later on. The forecast is that we are going to go from 6.8 and drop a full 1% to 5.8%. If that happens, two things are going to happen, really, from what they've been saying. The previous inclination was that it would go from 5.25% to 5.5%. That's the bank rate. That might still happen. They might decide to pause based on what Andrew Bailey said this week. We just don't know. We have no idea. But we are in limbo right now, and I'm sure that you will have questions. So I'm here to answer as many questions as I possibly can. If you do get value from the video, please be sure to do me one favor, really, is all I'm going to ask. Please make sure you smash the like button. It just means that other people who may benefit from answers to any of your questions will be recommended this video after the live has ended. It will just basically be pushed to them by the YouTube algorithm. And really, that's how this channel grows. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing already as well. We are over the 42,400 mark now, which is amazing. So the next stop is 42,500. But thank you so much for your support. Let's just see what you guys are saying. There is also a poll, by the way, guys. So I would love to know, because this is a topic that I'm seeing become more and more prominent. People are asking me more about it, and I'm definitely hearing more about this from some colleagues who are still in the industry that I speak to. Would you be tempted into a 20 to 30 year fixed rate? I am really fascinated to see what this poll is going to tell me, because I did this about a year ago and the results back then were not surprising. I want to know if this is going to be surprising. So please do vote in that poll. That will be absolutely amazing. Right, let me have a look and see what you guys are saying in the chat right now. Richard, welcome here, mate. Thank you very, very much for being here. What are you saying? I wanted to say a huge thank you for talking me out of buying a Porsche on credit to make myself more attractive. That was sound advice. Listen, cars, mate. I had to spend a little bit of money on mine. So basically, every single year, my MOT and my insurance are within a month of each other. And I paid off the car, so it's mine, and I'm putting miles on it now. I'm just going to run it into the ground. But it failed the MOT on the note that in a Tesla, the doors come out, and then when you pull the handle, the door, it engages the latch, the door opens. It was working 2 days prior. Day of the MOT, it fails. And so I was due to go on holiday. I was due to have a lot of meetings. And it was a nightmare getting it fixed, basically. And if you think, just hazard a guess in the chat how much you think a door handle replacement would cost with Tesla. Let me know in the chat, and I'll reveal the answer. Let's see if someone guesses right. It was expensive. And because they've changed their protocol, it's not that they can just go in and change one component. It has to be the whole thing. So the entire unit. I had to spend some money. I also had to replace 2 rear tires because mine is a rear-wheel drive, and the tires on the rear are bigger than the front. There's a lot of power going through the back. I had to replace 2 tires, and 2 tires alone was 700 quid. So that car has had quite a bit of expenditure over the past month, and my insurance has gone up as well because 2 people drove into me in the course of 12 months. So it's been very, very interesting. And I've paid off a chunk off the mortgage as well. So September was extremely expensive. But a part of that, a good part of that went towards the car. The majority of it, though, went into the mortgage, which I'm going to talk about at some point, probably next week or so. No, Cecile, not 2,000 per door. Nowhere near that, thank God. 1,000. Listen, you guys think it's way more expensive than it actually is. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just a little kind of price conscious these days. I mean, for a handle, it's 300 quid for a handle. And it ended up costing to have the handle replaced. So the mechanism, it's pretty mad. But you guys are saying £1,000. Like, Tesla is expensive. If you have certain things done with them, it can be really, really expensive. It's ironic because on the day that I was having mine fixed at the service center in Chester with Tesla, I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Julia. She also has a Tesla, and she also had the same issue, and she was quoted £4,000 to fix whatever was happening with the door, but the symptoms were the same. The handle was coming out, but the latch wouldn't engage when you pull the door. She was quoted £4,000. Maybe I got off lightly. I don't know. You tell me. But anyway, let's go back up to the top here. I'm just scanning through. So anyone picked up my new Tesla? Anyway, I picked up my new Tesla on Thursday. Whatever noise the EVs make. Yeah, listen, I don't know if anyone's been following. I did a little bit last week on the new Model 3 up fresh, and gave a bit of an overview of Tesla and just how well the company's performing. I hold Tesla in my ETFs index funds, but I also hold individual stocks in Tesla as well. And it's volatile as anything. But I think the new Model 3 refresh is pretty awesome, to be fair. And I like that they've improved the car and they put it out at exactly the same price point. So they've not even increased the price of the car. And I think that's going to go a long way in terms of them keeping their market share. I mean, the Model 3 was already last year the best-selling car. I think they sold 2 million units so far. So to make that better and not increase the price for it, I think is a win-win. Really just talks about their dominance as well. Let me get to your questions though. Let's have a look and see what you guys are saying. 1 second. This is interesting because, Leandro, if you look at the states, so the states have managed to get their inflation down to 3.2%. And the Fed said that they're warning of putting rates up over in the states. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens and to see whether the CPI read this month is going to be in line with their target. Let me just bring this up actually, because normally when we do these, I share a screen so that you can kind of see where I get my information from. And all of this data is collated from, ONS and reputable sources. But as through the year we've done this, the numbers have changed quite a bit, and they've done that quite regularly because they are forecast and they are going to change. But it's going to be interesting to see, right, if things don't go to plan. So let's just say we miss the forecast target, right? What the Bank of England decides to do, whether they panic and push inflation, well, the interest rate harder to combat inflation, particularly if it goes up, is going to be very, very interesting to see. Because the bizarre thing that I found last week following some of this news and providing commentary was they said one thing like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and they're doing something completely different. And it's not that they're entitled to change their mind based on what's happening, but they went out of the way. Jeremy Hunt went out of the way to speak to news and say he gives the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, full support in doing what is necessary to bring inflation down using monetary policy. Andrew Bailey has been on the news a number of times insisting it. It was in the minutes of one of their meetings that I covered here on the channel. So now for there to be kind of like this U-turn, if you will, it's a little okay. Let's see what happens really. But let me just share this screen and you guys let me know if you have any questions on this, because I'm as confused really as I guess anyone else paying attention to this, because what's going to happen? There are so many variables here. Let me just get this screen set up properly. There are so many variables here. So this is the line that we're looking at. This line right here. All right. So this is where we are currently. 6.8 currently. This is the target for Q3. 5.8. Then Q4, 3.9. So if this month we see a reading, let's just say it's 6.3, what happens? Do they then adjust this forecast to say, right, we're at 5.25 right now, we're going to go to 5.5, then hold, and then start to push interest rates down Q2? Do they then say, actually, you know what? No, we need to push up to 5.75. It's going to be really, really interesting to see. But you could be right here that there might be a bit of a bounce back this month with inflation. Who knows? I guess we're going to have to see in a couple of weeks what the numbers are saying. Thomas is saying here, I currently put £1,000 into pension, 10% me, 7% max company, solely sacrifice, 1,000 into stocks and shares ISA, and 450 into club Lloyd Saver at 5.5. Do you recommend less, more into pension? So you've got 17% going into your pension right now. Whether you should pay more into it or not, Tom, is going to be down to, look, do you feel like you're robust from your financial setting right now? Because any money that you put in, obviously you can't access for until you're 55 on the current rules, right? So the accessibility is going to be a big question to answer. Do you need access to the money? Do you envision that you're going to need access to the money if anything were to change in the next 10, 20 years? Because if you do, you might then say, actually, you know what, let's put it into an ISA. You're going to get the tax-free benefit of an ISA. Income will be tax-free as well if you did use it to generate an income. But with a pension, obviously, it's invested over a longer period of time. So I would answer that by asking you, do you feel financially robust right now? So if you've got an emergency fund, do you have that fat within your finances to cover anything that might happen, really? If you feel secure, then yeah, you could probably put more into the pension. But if you feel like you're going to need access to the money, or actually, you know what, maybe I need to boost up my coffers a little bit more, then maybe continue going into your ISAs first. But that's how I would view it. But it sounds like you're in a really good position if you're doing 17% into your pension, mate. I mean, you're going to be on track for a really good pension because the contributions are great, really, really good. Well done. Delight. 10 years. You know what, right? I'm not going to lie. I've had to change my specs, and I've had to change my specs because my eyes have changed. So I need them for reading things further out, right? And over the past 6 to 9 months, anything close that my long kind of vision specs would help me read has gone out the window. So now if I've got anything in front of me, I have to take these off to read them. So I changed some specs. These are now digital lenses. So it's got the long side and it enables me to read closer. But I feel as though I can cope, generally speaking, with screens without actually wearing these now, which is a bit of a relief, really, to be honest. And I just wear these now for driving and maybe if I'm watching TV, that kind of stuff. But thanks for the compliment. It's nice. Unfortunately, I can't have like laser surgery done because my left eye is really, really bad. My right eye is my dominant. And so they said, look, if anything goes wrong, if you were to have, laser surgery and it impacts your right eye, your left eye isn't really that strong enough to compensate for the right. So I'm stuck with the glasses and I cannot put contact lenses in. I'm just too squirmy. I just can't do it. Tried it for years. Impossible. But thanks. I'm just scanning, guys. 1 second. Yeah, cheers for this, Thomas. I appreciate that. Let me just get rid of this, actually. Let me just go full screen. I don't know whether I've frozen so far. I think I did it a moment ago. I've got a new computer coming, guys. It's not going to arrive until the 18th now. I've got the delivery date from Apple. The laptop I'm currently working on, it's just, if I have multiple tabs open, it's just got to the point where now it just doesn't operate. And so I've upgraded massively. It's going to arrive on the 18th. So if I do freeze, bear with me. It's the computer doing its thing. It does catch up, but it just takes a little while. And it's not ideal for live streaming, but there's very little I can do until the new one arrives on the 18th. I've actually gone for a Mac Studio, so it's really, really powerful. And I'm looking forward it to arrive, but it cost an absolute bomb. So it better work. It better work well. But yeah, thanks for this, Thomas. I try to give as much detail as possible. I try to highlight my experience and my expertise. I've been in financial services for 15 years across, retail banking, corporate banking, wealth management, qualified as a financial advisor and a mortgage advisor. So I've advised on a lot of this stuff. And I try to give as much detail as possible because I think that's important for people to be able to make good decisions and for at least people to know where to start their research from. And that's maybe where I'm a little bit different than other YouTubers because of the experience that I have. So thank you for that. Cheers. You know what? I've seen this on TikTok all week. I do come into London quite a bit, but I've been okay with the Tesla because obviously there's no congestion charge anyway. But with the expansion, it's like, I don't understand what. I get it, clean energy, but I was watching something the other day and they were talking about how clean the air is on the underground. And it's not. It's dangerous on the underground. So you don't want people to drive in. You want them to use public transport. But the air in the underground, which is the main transportation facility in the city, is just at dangerous levels. And to extend that far when people are being squeezed, I'm just like, it's just poor timing. It really, really is. And the mind boggles as to whether or not Sadiq Khan really kind of like gets it. I saw something. He had an interview on the TV and he was being asked, saying, obviously there's a lot of people who are against this. What if this costs you the next election? And he was like, I believe that most people are with me on this. And I'm like, public reaction at the moment doesn't feel like it. It feels like a money grab, if I'm honest. And if you can't necessarily afford to go and buy a new car because you're struggling to keep up with the rent or the mortgage, this is just something else. It's, think about that every single day. And I think it extends all the way to Orpington now. I mean, that's mad. It's absolutely crazy how much it's extended to. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops, whether they're going to back down or not. Question here. Bank of England decision to cut rates when inflation is 3 times higher than the States. It's suicidal when crude oil and commodities all spiking currently. No chance of a cut. I would agree with you on that, mate. I mean, I think they're being overly ambitious to even think on the forecast that we would hit our 2% target before the States when our inflation rate is double that of the States. I mean, it's just, again, I've said it on this channel, right? You hope, or at least you would hope, that we have the right kind of people in office doing the right things, but it doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence, because like, if you can see this stuff, you know that it's going to have an impact, and it might not have an impact in this immediate reading that we're going to get, but it's going to have an impact at some point. So whilst they're trying to balance this whole, we don't want to tighten it too much to the point that, maybe next year when we need a bit of economic growth, we've done too much to hinder that economic growth because interest rates have gone up, therefore the cost of borrowing's gone up. We don't want that. It's like, come on, guys, like, seriously, pragmatism and being informed. I'm lost for words. I just know that I wouldn't want to be one of the guys on the MPC or in the Bank of England. I wouldn't want that responsibility, but you've got to communicate clearly. You've got to have a plan. And it just feels as though, and I polled it last week, it feels like they haven't got a plan. And I think most people are under the impression that they really don't have a plan. They're being reactive. And that's great to a certain extent, but it's winging it. You need a plan. And fair enough, monetary policy alone isn't going to solve the problem that we have. We do need proper economic policy. We need some ideas from politicians. And that's been scarce right now. And so it's going to be very, very interesting indeed to see what happens at the next inflation reading. Because if it doesn't hit that target, they're going to have to push. And I'll be very, very surprised if they don't. Really, really surprised if they don't. They're already being blamed, and rightly so, for the fact that they've taken so long to react. Actually, you know what? I did a comparison today. Let me show you this comparison, actually, because it's very, very interesting. Now, how did I do this? I did this way. I did a comparison between the US and the UK in terms of the interest rates. And it's very, very, very interesting indeed when you see how our interest rates have lined up against the US over the course of time. And it's been very, very interesting to see where they've diverged across the course of time as well. Let me just bring this back up. 1 second. I'm looking at interest rates here, UK, US. There we go. Okay, let me just share this. So take a look at this graph. Let me just hide this one quickly. Hopefully you can see this properly. Take a look at this. Let me just make this, if I can make this a little bit bigger that way, it's not going to help. There we go, right? So what we're looking at here is interest rates. So this goes all the way back into the 70s or so, right? So the UK is in blue, and the US, so the Fed rate, is in the black right here. Now, we almost mirror the States, apart from, some periods of time where we had some diversions, right? Let me see if I can get this bigger. 1 second. There we go. I know it doesn't look the best for you here. I'm just trying to get the balance between me being able to see this and you having a good view as well. So, right, black is the US, we're in the blue. Okay, look at this difference, right? So we saw the interest rate in the States drop back then. This is in the 70s, rise over here. And, it kind of tracks in through the 80s and the mid 80s, but then we see a bit of a divergence here, right? So they separate again, and they separate here massively too. And, if you look at it, this is what, 89, 90 interest rates in the state. What's this? Probably about 7%, maybe 7, maybe 8%. Look at where we are. It's maybe 15%. So almost double, right? And just whilst they come down, kind of within a good sharp period of each other, there's a huge gap between the two. But look at this, 2007, 2008, almost tracking. And this is what the Bank of England is being blamed for, this right here. Look how quickly the state started to react way, way earlier. We kind of like lagged along. Let me see if I can actually zoom into this. Let's go 1 year. Actually, we need to go out further. One sec. All right. Look, just that little bit of, I'm going to be a little bit more decisive and act a little bit sooner from the States meant that they've just had a bit of a head start, and it feels as though we've kind of mirrored everything that they've basically done. It's really, really interesting. And like I said, if you look at the inflation numbers for the States right now, you go on to countries here and you go to the United States, they're at 3.2. I mean, they're saying that they're going to hit inflation. Their target, well, they're going to be at 2.6 in Q2. We're forecasting we're going to be at 2% in Q2 2024, and they're at 3.2 right now. It's mad. I mean, Q4 they're expecting to go up to 5.75, and yeah, we're double, and we're expecting to kind of just be able to hold our rates at 5.5%. Look, at the end of the day, I hope they get it right. I really, really do. I hope they know exactly what they're doing, but it doesn't seem to be a lot of confidence in their abilities or anything that they're doing right now. Time is going to tell more than anything else, I think. Anil, if next year there is a recession, this could be the start of the Great Reset, World Economic Forum, own nothing, be happy, sharing economy. Possibly. I mean, I think the chances of a recession are pretty high. I mean, I think Andy Haldane was saying 50-50 last week. I become a little bit skeptical because they will never say anything that will spook the general public or put too much fear in the general public. I think it all depends on what happens with interest rates and inflation, generally speaking. It's going to be difficult. It really, really is. I wasn't a G until I moved out the hood. EV cars depreciate so fast. The exception to this is Tesla. Therefore, all cars are EV. I see Tesla stock rising. Yeah, I mean, I would say they still depreciate, mate. This is where, so I'll talk from the perspective of some of my mates who have got like Model S's like I have. Like my one's pretty old now. It's got a ton of miles on it, but it has got free supercharging for life. It's the only reason why I'm going to keep it. But if you think about what's happening at the moment with the Model S and the Model X, right? So in the UK, you cannot get a right-hand drive Model S or Model X, the new one. You can't. And I test drove a left-hand drive one, and beautiful car. I mean, literally, it feels like sitting in a car from the future compared to what I have now. They've refined it so beautifully. The tech is mad. And just the speed, oh my God, I mean, my one's quick. Mine 0 to 60 is like 3.2. Like the plaids are sub 2, mad quick. And then you've got the halo effect where it just keeps going. It's nuts. But you've got to buy it in a left-hand drive. So I know a couple of people have actually bought a left-hand drive. And they will be there. They are very upset in that the recent price drop for the Model S and the Model X. So Tesla aren't really focusing on that part of, I guess, their offering. It's not their priority anymore. If you think about the delivery numbers of the Model X, Model Y, the Model S and the Model X compared to the Model 3 and the Model Y, minuscule, like fractions of. And so if you have a Model S right now, if you have a left-hand drive one in the UK, you're not holding value on that. No way, because it's too much of an inconvenience. I wouldn't buy one because of that. It's too much of an inconvenience. Imagine just simple things, going into a parking lot. To the point, they were really, really clever in the end. They were like, oh, you can get it with an extender. So they're selling it with these extenders. The ones that you use to pick up trash. They will sell you a left-hand drive car with an extender. So if you put into a parking lot, you can roll down the window and then use the extender to press the button for the ticket and get the ticket out. Very clever stuff, but still, you're driving on the wrong side of the road, and that takes some getting used to. Beautiful car, but I think in the UK, if you bought one of those, you've got to be willing the fact that you're not going to have any resale value in one of those new Model S or X's in that configuration. You just won't. And so that devaluation immediately, and because obviously it's left-hand drive, you can't finance it either. So you got to stump up cash. And I test drove one. It was about 2 months ago. I was doing a corporate talk near Oxford, and they had on the grounds a Tesla dealership, a Tesla kind of like pop-up shop, and you're talking 125 grand to buy one of these things, the plaids. So it's not like small change. It's a lot of money, but you got to stump up cash to buy it, and then be okay with the fact that it's going to depreciate in value. If you've got like one of the previous Model S's, so if you've got something like a P100D with the whole ludicrous package, those ones, they're going to hold their value massively because they're the quickest ones of that generation, of that make, in a right-hand drive configuration. They're the daddy, so they're gonna maintain them. I don't know how much you're going to see Model 3s and Model Ys maintain their value, especially now that obviously you've got the new Model 3 coming out as the refresh. I think anyone who wants a Model 3 right now will see their values just drop, because who's going to buy one of the old style Model 3s that isn't as good as the new one, which is still the same price as a brand new Model 3 in the old shape. So I think they're still going to depreciate. But the good thing is those things will just go. I mean, I've got 175,000 miles on mine now, and it's still going. I've got no issues with the battery, no issues with the motors. It's been small, niggly little things like door handles that have been the issue. And I'm going to put maybe 200,000 on it. It will be at 200,000 probably next year, I would imagine. And then I'm just going to keep going to see what happens with it. But I think ultimately, is there competition for Tesla? Nah, not right now. Not right now. Even the traditional manufacturers are going to find it very, very hard to keep up. I played a clip of the CEO of Ford talking about, the whole vertical integration plan that Tesla had that they've now implemented and delivered. That is what really gives them their margin. I mean, their margin on cars is like 20%, 25%. That's unheard of in the automotive industry. So it doesn't matter who comes to the market with a cheaper price car. They can just say, oh, listen, we'll shave some off the top. We'll give a 15, 19% discount on the sale price just to keep market share. Other car manufacturers are not going to be able to do that because their margins are around about 5%. You cannot survive in that arena. And that's really the genius of Elon. So I'm holding my Tesla stock, needless to say. Here we go. 1 second. Yes, it did work. There it is. Okay. There is no Chinese economy this time around, so it cannot save the rest of the world. Yeah. It's interesting. Someone actually said, China being a threat. One thing I think that they've been, China being a threat to Tesla, and I think China is. I think they're getting the benefit of, number one, the Shanghai factory employing their citizens, and also getting the upskilling as well, and that would transfer into the likes of NIO, XPeng, other electric car manufacturers. They'll be able to get that brain drain, those expertise from Tesla over into their cars. And usually, China, they love to copy stuff, so they'll be able to benefit on that front as well. But so it'll be interesting to see where it basically goes from there. Sandra, what you saying here? Let me just come to you quickly. 1 second. Pete, money needs to go somewhere, i.e., pay to increase inflation. The question will be, people will spend it or save it. I say, really good question. I think it depends on the shape of the spend. I think what we've seen so far is people are having to spend on the essentials that have been increasing in price. And that's where I think there's a little bit of danger. And one of probably the reasons why, the likes of Rishi Sunak were trying to kind of get the retailers, the Sainsbury's, the Tesco's to do something, right? Because if people have to spend more money on the essentials, then that tells you that core inflation is ingratiated into the system, and that's problematic. If people are spending money on things like luxuries and you're able to stream that back, then yeah, it has a chance. But you're right, it has to be paid for somehow. Um, People are going to have to will people spend or save? I mean, I spent a lot of money last month. I paid off a chunk of the mortgage. So does that help? Probably not. Um, and I think people are still going on holidays. Still, people are still enjoying luxuries. There is definitely a very, very different um, class that is now becoming even more apparent. Right? There are definitely people who are really, really struggling. But I guarantee you, you go to Selfridges in London or Harrods in London, mate. People are still having very nice lunches and spending a load of money, like as if there was nothing's happened. There's no inflation, and I think that those two sides of of society, that gap is becoming even more and more apparent now. Apologies, I'm late to the party, but what's the current forecast on Bank of England rates? Will I be looking at a bloodbath in the UK mortgage market in 2025? I think by the time we get to 2025, the hope is, fingers crossed, it won't be as bad. But there's been confusion last week because the Bank of England boss he's kind of U-turned on what he said was going to happen. But this is what I think will happen. I think when they meet on the 21st, we're going to see one more increase. So we're going to go from 2.25, 5.25 to 5.5, and then it's a question whether they hold or not. If the next inflation read is wrong, though, is higher than what they're forecasting at 5.8, then I think they're going to have to decide what they're going to have to do, because I cannot see them have the inflation number come in higher and then just be like, we'd stick it at 5.5% for the next 3 quarters. I think they'll get slaughtered for that, and I think it would be foolish of them to do that. So a lot of it rides on what happens over the next couple of weeks and the Monetary Policy Committee meeting on the 21st. But the general consensus is there will be a rate rise in the next couple of weeks, and then by 2025, fingers crossed, we start to see mortgage rates come down. Having said that, though, I personally think that the new norm for mortgage rates is going to be around about that 4 or 5% mark. Personally, that's what I think. The podcast tomorrow morning is going to be very, very interesting because I'm asking the question on mortgage rates specifically. And if you haven't already voted in the poll, please vote in the poll. I'm just going to drag this across quickly because I'm asking here, would you be tempted into a 20 to 30 year fixed rate mortgage? That's what I want the answer to. And the episode on the podcast tomorrow speaks to that, because for some reason, providers are thinking there is a demand for those types of mortgages. And if you have voted no, if you wouldn't mind just letting me know, what are your thoughts behind the no? When I ran this poll last year, a lot of people said that they wouldn't go for such a mortgage because they felt as though they'll be paying the mortgage until they were basically retired. And I'm like, okay, but the average term of a mortgage in the UK is 30, 35 years. That's the average term. So does it make a difference if when you first take out your mortgage, you lock in that rate for 30 years to the end, or do what we normally do and shop around every 2 to 5 years? I think a year ago, because we were just, when I ran the poll and did the first video, we were literally, I think, about 3 interest rate rises in. So at that point in time, people didn't know what was coming. Now, with hindsight, I'm very, very interested to see what the results of this poll are going to be, because we've had 14 interest rate hikes. We've gone from 0.1% at one point now to 5.25, probably 5.5% in a couple of weeks' time. Mortgage payments, huge increase. And we're not going to start feeling that. People are not going to feel that in their pocket until next year. Q2 is when it's really going to kick in and hurt. I mean, for me, I'm going to feel it much sooner. I'm going to feel it at the end of October, but I'm going to be okay. But I'm still going to have to find an extra £200, £210 per month for my mortgage, right? Luckily, I'm going to be okay. A lot of households don't have 100 quid in savings. So how are they going to do that? And at the top of this, I spoke about the fact that most households, because they don't have maybe an emergency fund or savings to cover that increase in the monthly mortgage, they're going to use credit cards. You're going to use overdrafts. They're going to take out personal loans. God forbid they take out payday loans. So what happens? It's really, really difficult right now. And so the argument between the whole, should they pause? Okay, there's a balance to be had. Should they pause interest rates because they don't want to put a stifling on the economy? Or do you push ahead and try and get the inflation number down as quickly as possible, then be able to lift your foot off interest rates later, causing more pain for the long term, well, in the short term, for the long term benefit? It's a tricky call to make. I wouldn't want to make that call. I really, really wouldn't, because it's cruel. It feels like it's an evil choice to make, and the Tories have had a really rough time. Not that the Bank of England or anything like that they're not affiliated to a political party. They are a separate entity to the government. Someone will take the blame for it. And so it's difficult. It really, really is. But I think we're going to see an interest rate rise in a couple of weeks. But by 2025, hopefully by 2025, things have calmed down and you'll be in a position where you'll be able to get a decent rate. But decent rates are not going to be 1.5%, 2%, 2.5%. No chance. The new rates are going to be around about 4 or 5%. I firmly believe that. And even if you go back onto the chart that I was sharing a little bit earlier on, it just shows you the anomaly has been the interest rates that we've experienced over the past 10 years. That's the true anomaly, because interest rates have always been high. We've just happened to be in this circumstance after the crash of 2007 and 2008, where monetary policy has required interest rates to be lowered to boost the economy. And this is where the catch-22 arises. You've now got inflation, and where you would normally lower interest rates to boost the economy, to encourage people to borrow more, right? To spend more. You can't do that because inflation is high. So it's almost like an inverse of where we were. You've got inflation, you're trying to bring down that core cost, day-to-day cost for people, but you've got no real, what are the economic levers that you can pull to boost the economy, to get us to a position where you've got growth. We've not even touched on things like Brexit, trade deals, that kind of stuff, the strength of the pound. Because, we talked about the fact that the pound was at the lowest point for 3 months last year. Well, that might not seem bad on the surface of it, but if you're importing goods in from the States or from Europe and the pound's taking a hammering, those things that you're importing are more expensive. Feeds inflation. It's such a catch-22. It's really, really hard to deal with. So you hope that these brain boxes they understand what they're doing. ULS is another tax on the citizens in the UK government. It's totally broke, and its citizens are paying for it all the time. Advice youngsters to move out to the US. Look, 100%. We spoke about this at the beginning of the stream, and this is where politicians, rightly so, will get accused of being completely and utterly out of touch. You can't expect people who are struggling to pay their mortgages and their rents. You're now going to say, well, actually, if you're going to drive into London for work, which you need to go into London probably for your work, for business, to earn money, to be able to make ends meet, which you can't already make ends meet. And then you've got to pay a daily charge to drive into the city just to line the pockets of the government. It's cruel. It's evil, in fact. And just think about it, mate. Like, seriously. Like, you wish I could sit down Sadiq Khan and just knock him on the head and be like, hello? Hello? Do you get this? Like, I know you've got an agenda here around clean air and all this kind of stuff. Fantastic. But maybe this isn't the right time to go about this or to implement this right now. Maybe you need to push this down a little bit. But he denies it's a tax grab. I don't believe him personally, but there you go. I'm not a politician, but couldn't the Bank of England in the same table that you shared before put the margin of error of what would happen if the percentage goes up or down? Yeah, I mean, with this data that we're seeing on here, we don't know. I'm sure they must have a margin of error. They must do, but we're just not seeing it in here. And I don't know whether they would actually want to put that out there or not because of how it might be reported. But I'm sure they've got a margin of error. I'm sure that they're constantly monitoring it, saying, okay, look, if it comes in here, what are we going to do? They must have contingencies, surely. Well, I hope they do anyway. But yeah, we can't see it in the data, or at least I can't see it in the data at this point. Someone's just asking here, why did the money printing go on for so long? 1 second. This is where it's frozen there. Why did the money printing go on for so long? I mean, it's interesting because if you listen to Andrew Hardane in the live that I did last week, he talked about the fact that it was a balance between the fact that if you think about the pandemic and the lockdown, people needed that financial intervention because the consequences of it would have been, well, companies would have let people go, which means that people would have lost their jobs. When people lose their jobs, that's potentially defaults on the mortgage, which is bad for the banks. The banks are an integral part of the economic, well, they input quite largely into the economic picture. So that then has economic consequences as well. So we don't have the money in the bank. So you print the money in order to make all of those financial provisions. And maybe they could have eased it off a little bit sooner. But in their wisdom or their stupidity, they just kept the printer on. I don't know that we would ever get a definitive answer for why did you not shut it off at a more opportune time. I think the question that they would ask back is, well, what would an opportune time, even in the benefit of hindsight, what would that have looked like? Because at the end of the day, people needed support. If you think about all the households that, with furlough, were able to maintain their livelihoods and their homes. It's really, really tricky. But I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, it's a really good question though. Chris is asking here, petrol and oil prices are still climbing. I don't see inflation coming down anytime soon. I mean, I asked last week, right? Does it feel cheaper to you when you're filling up your car, you're going shopping for your food shop? No, probably not. I mean, it doesn't matter how you decide to cut the data. You can slice it any way you want. The reality is, even if we were to get inflation down to 5.8%, we are still paying significantly more than we were 18, 24 months ago. And prices are still increasing, but they're not increasing as fast as they were 2 months ago. But we're still paying more at the end of the day. Until they get inflation to that 2% mark, then we might be able to start talking about whether or not people feel it in their pockets day to day. For me, I just don't think people do. And so when they say, there's light at the end of the tunnel, you can say that, but people need to feel it. And I think just, Andrew Belly did say that last week, but you've got this lag between the intervention is here, the impact of what you feel is a few months down the line. It's difficult, mate. Really, really is. CEO's just saying here, a record number of people are maintaining their lifestyle despite increased prices by using credit cards. Yes. I mean, look, we had a look at the because I remember I was doing packed lunch and we did a segment on consumer debt, and I've seen some data since the beginning of the year. Just on credit cards alone, the credit cards at the beginning of the year, I think the amount spent had jumped from, I think it was like just under $1 billion to 1.5 billion quid. People are using credit cards at a record rate. It's scary. And this is being fueled, don't forget, by the fact that 1 in 4 people do not have £100 in savings. That's why. So where do you go? There is no other place to go, which is why our system's so messed up, right? You put the squeeze on people. People haven't been educated on how to save for an emergency fund or money management to the point where, maybe some choices aren't made out of like spontaneity. I'm going to get this even though I can't really afford it. So we're not taught anything about that. We're not taught about debt. We're not taught about interest rates. we put the squeeze on someone. We don't have any resources or emergency funds available. So what we then do is we just go to the same old banks that lend us money. They're just going to now lend us more money at a higher rate. This is where it's a vicious cycle. And I've been there. I've been there. I know exactly what that's like. You're stuck. You haven't got anywhere to go. Unless you got a relative or a family member who can bail you out. But that only goes so far unless you've got someone with a bottomless pocket. It only goes so far. And so a large part of me thinks, education is so key. Like, you can talk about interest rates and inflation and all this kind of stuff, and it's great we're talking about it now, but what do we learn? What do we learn from all of this? How do we put ourselves in a better position? It really boils down to this, guys. Like, how do we put ourselves in a better position? Because this will happen again at some point. It will just be called something else. It'll be caused by something else as well. But we're going to be here again. I was having a chat with one of my mates, and he said and we've been talking about this for years. The things that we should learn, we often learn the hard way, because there's a very, very difficult balance between wants and needs. What we want is all very much apparent to us. Anyone can tell you what they want right off the bat right now. I want this, 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 this. Because number one, we're being marketed to, we're being sold to, we're being influenced left, right, and center. We know exactly what we want. But what do we need? What do we need to do? What are the things that we need to have in place? Those things right there are so much harder to come by, because oftentimes you don't learn what you need or need to have done until something goes wrong. Yeah. And I've been there. I really need to save an emergency fund. I really need to do this after I've incurred some debt, after I've learned the hard way. And it's so difficult to be able to balance those two things, mate. And it's mad the amount the amount people are using on credit cards now. And ironically, the banks are going to do extremely well. And we'll be talking about, investment content here more in the coming weeks. I'm doing a live next week, which you should definitely tune into, talking about, can you actually spot market trends? So in instances right now, are you investing in financials? Many people will shun financials, but financials are making money hand over fist right now, because guess what? Hey, interest rates are up. People need more debt. And some people can say that's a really convoluted, really messed up way of looking at the world, right? And it is. It really, really is. It's completely screwed. And this is why I still struggle with, like, how does capitalism get us to this point? Making money of people's misery. But it's a win from an investment point of view. I mean, I invest and I struggle with it, mate. I really, really do. It's just, I don't invest in any companies around armaments, for example, right? Because that's just me. I think for me, that's an easy call to make. But banks, though, however, I mean, I worked for banks for most of my career. And as much as I see the purpose for them, they're fuckers as well. They're dastardly little buggers as well. And there's that side of the element of the industry that I detest. I don't like. Instances like this, yeah, they'll be making money hand over fist. So how do I feel having money in, HSBC or one of the big banks that might be profiting from all of this? It's hard, mate. Really, really hard. This is where your more moral compass comes into these kind of conversations, and you can end up going on a tangent of all kinds of things. But it's mad. Cat Sam's is saying here, I bought your book on Amazon, Audible. Looking forward to starting it tonight while I can't sleep in this heat. Mate, thank you very, very much. I am actually launching a book club for the book. I had a lot of feedback from the book, which has been amazing. And people are like, are you doing anything where you take people through the book? And I'm waiting to finalize 2 or 3 things at the moment. But I'm actually launching a book club. So it's going to be 6 weeks. And the whole goal is to take people through the practical exercises in the book. So you've got it in Audible. I describe it audibly, but if you had the physical book, you'll see the actual exercise template. I'm going to be taking people through all of those exercises over the course of 6 weeks. And so there'll be tasks every single week for people to do who join the club. And we just literally go through everything from the whole budgeting, building an emergency fund, creating some financial security, investing. There, I'm throwing in my investment course as a freebie for that. We're going to be looking at your credit score, actually get you to download your credit score, have a look at it, see if there's anything bad, good on there, how to identify things, how to challenge things, taking people through the entire practical arc of the book, starting with goal setting as well. So we're going to be doing that over 6 weeks. And when it launches, it will be £10 a week, essentially. And I'm going to be doing that for cohorts of maximum 20 to start off with. So if you're following me on Instagram or on socials, you'll hear a little bit more about that once I finalize the last couple of things. But I appreciate you for buying the book. Really. Thank you very, very much. And if you do have any questions, obviously do let me know. See, I love okay. This I the portion that I'm getting to right now with in the comments about 30-year mortgages. This is in response to the poll. So if you've not voted in the poll, please do so. I'm asking you what would tempt you into a 20 to 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So someone's just saying here, Lisandro's saying here, 30 years not to the current year, but yes, for something less than 4.5%. Interesting. Someone is also saying here, well, Isaac is saying here, the early repayment charge would be crazy. How many people live in the same houses for 20 to 30 years these days? Really, really good point as well. I talk about this on the podcast tomorrow, but I will have something later on this week as well, actually looking at things, because from what I'm seeing currently, there is a provider that is looking to launch something where early repayment charge not going to be an issue. There's more flexibility. And interestingly, the interest rate available. Because let's be honest, you're looking in for 20 to 30 years, so they're not going to give you a 1.4%. But what if it's comparable to the existing rates that we have currently right now, or a little bit lower? Would that be tempting? This is how lenders are thinking right now. Because ultimately they're thinking, well, actually, if we can provide a competitive rate, but for longer, would people be tempted into it? And I think for maybe first time buyers, it may, assuming you can move easily, there are no early repayment charges or not unrealistic early repayment charges, I can see it doing a job. And I can see it doing a job because you've got to remember, during the pandemic and lockdown, the government actually, what did they do? I think they did something with stamp duty again, which basically meant that they wanted to kind of prop up the property market, right? So there'll be a lot of first-time buyers who in 2021 would have gone into a 95% loan to value mortgage, right? Probably on a 2-year fixed, because they wanted to kind of truncate the cost down as much as they possibly could, who right now will probably be sat there thinking, what did we do? Because not only has property market fallen, if you had a 95% loan to value, so a 5% deposit, 95% loan to value, and the market's fallen, you have a high probability you're in negative equity right now. And if you were in a 2-year fixed rate, you took a 2-year fixed rate, renewing now, you may have got it for something like, I don't know, 2.5%, 3%. I guarantee you right now, you're going to get something like 6.5%, 6.7%. If you can move. Now, if they are unfortunate enough to be a mortgage prisoner where they can't get onto a fixed rate because of negative equity, they're going to be stuck on standard variable rates at 7.998%. And so I think for that count of, I guess, person who may be a first-time buyer, and you're thinking this is a really good deal, I could probably fix this in for 30 years, assuming the early repayment charges aren't too restrictive, aren't ridiculous, and you have the ability to actually, I can move after 5 years if I found a better rate, and those things are baked into the mortgage offer, I think they could do really, really well. But who knows? I don't know what they're building specifically, but I'm hearing a lot of murmurs around those kind of considerations are being made. So does it make it more attractive, I guess, is the question, to be tempted into a 20 or 30-year fixed rate mortgage? I don't know. Again, I'll end the poll very, very shortly to see what you guys are saying. But again, I'm going to be comparing this to what the poll was last year before we started to see all of these huge interest rate rises. Well, they weren't anywhere near as many or as high as the rate is right now. Juggernaut's just saying here, I locked in my rate this year at 5.99%. I literally clicked that like 10 seconds ago, or maybe 5 seconds ago, for it to pop on the screen. That's how bad the laptop is right now. I locked in my rate 2 years ago this year at 5.99%, and now looking at people's rates 7+%. That's gut wrenching. Yeah. I only have one friend. I have one friend, and I know one person on social media who managed to lock in at a 1 point, I think it's into 1.6 or something like that for 5 years, and they managed to do that. I think it was like just before the interest rate started rising. So they're 18 months or so into their maybe second years, and they've got 3 years left. And I'm like, that was probably the best decision you could ever have made to lock in at 5 years at that rate in hindsight now. But I think you're right. It's pretty ugly out there right now, mate. Jones is asking here another question when it catches up, mate. Apologies. Another question. How would this affect home buyers and bought into the Help to Buy scheme? Interesting. You know what? I don't know, because if you think about the Help to Buy, right, they would have lent you 20% of your purchase price. Yeah. So if it's 200 grand, they would have lent you, what, 40 grand? Yeah. If property prices have fallen, I don't know whether or not, if your original property was 200 grand and it's falling to 180, that they'll say, oh, just pay us 20% of the price. I think it's on sale. Well, it's on the value that you pay. But I'm not sure that they're going to be willing to take a hit if your property's at 180 when the amount that they lent you was based on 200 grand. I think you would still have to foot the bill for that, potentially, which is not nice to hear if you're on Help to Buy. I don't know. It's a really good question, actually. It's probably one that I need to. I'll see if I can dig into it and find an answer for that, because that could be a really, really good video, actually. That would be a very, very good video. So thanks for that, Juggernaut. I'll have a look at that. But the answer is I don't know, because I just can't see the government saying, your property's worth 180 now. I'll just give us 20% of the sale price of that. I don't see that happening, mate, because they're not going to. I just don't see them being that generous. So I think you're still going to have to pay about 40, even if your property's falling in value. Right, I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just scanning very, very quickly. There's a question here about BRICS. Let's get onto this one. BRICS. Will BRICS take over the US currency soon? I don't know about the currency. Look, GDP though, I mean, those BRICS nations, those dastardly small BRICS nations, they contributed more to GDP this year than the entire G7. Just think about that. The G7. Those are the juggernauts, the big countries: France, Germany, UK, America. The G7, BRICS, contributed more to global GDP for the first time than the G7 combined. I haven't done a video on this, and it's very, 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 very interesting that Saudi Arabia has now joined BRICS, or they will be joining BRICS as of the start of 2024. Because what does that do for the petrodollar? And don't get me wrong, them picking Saudi Arabia was very strategic. That was a strategic move to annoy the Americans. And I think, what can America do? I mean, I'm hearing a lot of people saying, they're never going to be able to compete with America. Maybe true to some extent. I'm not entirely convinced though, mate. I'm just not. You cannot deny their GDP contribution. You just can't. I mean, India. You look at I don't know if I can see this here on this one. I might do another video on this, right? But if you look at the growth chart of India over the past 10 years, mate, you think the interest rate hike is parabolic. Theirs is just, it's a upward, it might just be a straight line up. They have grown so much. So much. Yeah, China's in a little bit of trouble right now. They're not doing the best. Russia, yeah, not doing the best. But the main thing that you have there with BRICS is they're trying to create a new world order, a new way of the world working, not where it's entirely dictated to or by the West. And I think that's going to be where there's going to be a lot of unease, potentially. And it's going to be the cause for a lot of political tension in the coming 10 years. It really, really will be. Will the currency be a threat to the US? Potentially, if they get it off the ground. But I think they're still a way away from that. If they peg it to gold, then probably yes, indeed. If they start trading amongst themselves, which is the whole idea, right? They want to wean themselves from the dependency of the dollar. I mean, having Saudi Arabia in that block for that alone is huge. I mean, that's problematic for the States. Like, that's a real problem, a big problem for the States. It really, really is. And they may not necessarily want to admit it, but they'll be worried about that for sure. The question is, what are they going to do? Who knows? They can't bomb those companies to death, because that's typically what they would do. They'll go and invade a country, they'll bomb, they'll assassinate, they'll, plot a coup. I'm sure the CIA will be plotting what they can do. Is it going to work though? I don't know. Time will tell us what's going to happen. But I think BRICS and the whole idea of BRICS, it's going to be attractive to a lot of countries that have been disenfranchised, that haven't been part of the club, that have been victims of, sanctioned because, hey, the US dollar's the king, right? That's what happens when you're a bully in the playground. At some point, you're going to lose your power. You're going to lose that strength, and the other kids are going to be like, actually, we band together, we're probably a little bit stronger than them. And that's where I truly believe things are right now. And I think a lot of people won't like to hear that because of what that potentially means. But I just don't think you can have your head in the stand and just ignore, what happens in other parts of the world because your belief system just doesn't allow you to hear it. You got to look at all things from all sides. And I'm looking at it. I think it's going to be very, very interesting now that their global contribution to GDP is higher than the G7. I am fascinated to see at what point the BlackRocks and the investment funds start to shift money towards those economies in global investment portfolios. You wait for that, mate, and that will tell you everything, because the money is going to go where the money goes, and people like BlackRock, Vanguard, America who? UK, Europe who? Like Europe who? If there's money to be made in another part of the world, that's where they're going. That's the simple fact of the matter. So that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting to see when that subtle shift is going to happen, because it will at some point. It will 100% happen at one point. And when it does, I think that's going to be very, very telling. Cecile's just saying here, 5 years ago, I locked my mortgage rate for 2.3, and they're offering a 10-year at the same, and regret that decision now. Wow. A 10-year. See, this is where longer term fixes, I mean, a 10-year at 2.3. It's pretty decent. Have I read this right? 5 years ago, I locked in my rate at 2.3, and for 2.3, they're now offering a 10-year at the time. They were offering a 10-year at the time. Yeah. Hindsight's a beautiful thing. So, yeah. Because if you think about what you would be moving to now, from a 2.3, you'll be going on to probably 5.5, 5.75, if not 6%, depending on your loan to value. So that's 4 percentage points potentially. And that's hundreds of pounds a month, depending on the size of your mortgage. You extrapolate that by the number of years. So if you locked in for a 2-year, that's 8 years of higher rates that you would have saved. Even if you locked in for 5, that's still 5 years of higher rates you would have saved. Monetary wise, it's huge. But hindsight's a beautiful thing. We know that it would have been a better decision to lock in for that for a 10-year period now that we know interest rates are where they are. But like I said, at the time, we didn't know this was going to happen. And such is our culture in the UK, that because interest rates were so high in like the 70s and the 80s, there was only one way for the interest rates to go anyway, just down. And that's kind of the same in the US, because we can see from what I shared a little bit earlier on, it kind of mirrored each other, right? So it just so happens that in the States, though, they will happily lock in for 20, 25, 30 years for the term of their mortgage so that they can financially plan. We just don't do it that way. And so are we at that point of potential change now? Well, we start thinking like the Americans and think, actually, you know what? Let's lock it in for 20 years. Let's lock it in for 15 years. Let's lock it in for 30 or 10 years, because we want to be able to plan financially and know that, okay, we're fixed. We can save for children's school fees and I don't know. I really don't know. Let me end this poll actually, because I just want to see what you guys are saying. It's actually very, 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 very close. This is way closer than I thought it was going to be. It's the polar opposite of where it was last year. Like literally last year when I ran this poll, I didn't run it here on the channel. I ran it on Instagram. It was something like 92% said no. And only a small margin, I think it was like 7 or 8% said yes. So the response here is 57% saying no, 42% of you saying yes. Very, very interesting. Really, really interesting. Stay tuned this week, because like I said, tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about it on the podcast. So you'll see that video come live on the channel at 12. But then I will be digging into one of the providers that is currently in the process of actually providing one of these. I think it was last year I did something on a company called Habito, because they were offering those the long-term mortgage offering at the time. There is someone new. So I'm going to be covering a little bit of what I know or what I've been hearing about them. And again, they're building in flexibility, but it's going to be interesting, really, see what the verdict is. Once we find out a little bit more. Penguin is saying here, I'm just worried about my investments as all full of US. I think, look, should you be worried? I mean, the S&P 500 is up still. So I've got money in the S&P 500, so as my missus, money's up. It's good. I think the most important thing, and maybe the live that we're going to do next Sunday, which is, can you spot trends? And we're talking about the investment world again, might be really, really useful. But let me leave you with this thought. Look, at the end of the day, if you're invested in those companies, right? So as long as you're in something like an index fund or an ETF, number one, you've got diversification. So you've got money across a group of really strong international companies that generate revenue. More importantly, they generate profit. Some of them may pay dividends as well. So these companies will have decades experience, track record of weathering storms just like this. Inflationary periods or recessionary periods, they've got experience. Their business is built to be able to withstand all of that. So when you think about that, you shouldn't be worried. I think you should be worried if you, over the past 2 years, have maybe followed a lot of YouTubers and they've said, pick this stock, pick that stock, pick this stock, and you've just followed what they've said without really knowing what you're doing on your own in terms of why you're selecting the companies, balance sheet, all that kind of stuff, and actually looking at your portfolio from a point of, right, how do I diversify this so that you have companies with the backbone to give you support in times like this. I mean, in inflationary times, tech typically does badly. I think tech has done okay purely because there's been a lot of stuff going on with AI. But typically, tech does really, really badly. So I think if you look at it from that lens, should you be worried? As long as you've done your due diligence, you know what you're doing, I think you'll be fine. And also just think about why you're investing in and the whole purpose of investing. If you're investing for 1 to 2 years, then yeah, you should be worried 100%. If you need the money out in 2 years' time, I'd be telling you to really, really look at your portfolio to make sure that it's as strong as possible, and even question whether you should be invested right now because there's so much uncertainty. Anything could happen between now and over the next 2 years. Anything could happen. But if you're investing because actually you're looking to build wealth over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, doesn't really matter. Yes, I've mentioned the fact that, BlackRock and the big investment houses might decide to, at some point, to start allocating money to the BRICS countries and the BRICS economies. That's not going to happen immediately. And even if it does, you'll probably hear about it and you can shift your portfolio accordingly. But that doesn't change the underlying strength of the companies that you're probably going to have in a place like the S&P 500. Like, these are international companies, massive conglomerates. They sell products and services that are integral to the way that we live. They generate revenue. They generate profit. The profits might take a hit, which might mean that your investment doesn't perform as well. But ultimately, I think it's still a good company. And as long as you're comfortable with the companies that you have in your portfolio, or the ETF or the index fund you've invested in, I don't think you should be worried. Yes, things might be down in the short term, but over the long term, I think the track record is there. And past performance is no indication to future performance, but sometimes it's the only thing that we can have a look at. And when you're doing your research, it is about making sure that, you can stand on your own 2 feet and say, okay, look, I think this is the best place. But if you are worried and it's because maybe there are a few companies in there that maybe you've picked and you're not too sure about, I'll ask you to go revisit, make sure that you've done it. So yeah. Juggernaut, thank you so much for the super chat, my friend. Thank you very, very much. Really, really helpful. It really does help the channel and actually helps me as well. Thank you very much. Mate, listen, you've just killed it with this comment right here. Honestly, I'm watching what's happening in Africa right now. China and Russia are all over that continent. And it's been so fascinating watching what's happening with Niger and France. I saw a clip yesterday. And to think about that this has been happening for so long is infuriating. And I'm like, bravo, Niger. Fucking bravo. Finally. So here's the story, right? France gets a lot of uranium from Niger. Now, apparently, the cost of a kilogram of uranium on the open market is $200 a kilogram. Because Niger is a former French colony, guess how much France have been paying for a kilogram of uranium? 80 cents. 80 cents. The going price is 200 euros. They've been paying 80 cents because it's a former colony. If that isn't daylight robbery, it's infuriating. It's infuriating. So now they've woken up and they've been like, nah, you're going to pay the going rate now. And so France is cacking themselves. And rightly so. But like, Russia and China are in Africa saying, look, we will do a equitable partnership with you. And opposed to you being ripped off in the fashion that you have been, with that being a prime example. I mean, it's very, very strategic. It's very, very strategic. And part of me hopes that the African leaders are able to get away from the corrupt tendencies that they've always had, where they just think about themselves and nobody else, and they're happy to be a puppet. I hope they're going to be able to get through that, but it's just absolutely mad what's going on right there. It's just, and it feels like those countries, Burkina Faso, they're all waking up, and I hope that they continue to. There is obviously a threat, because at the end of the day, if you think about Western civilizations, it has been intentional to keep that continent poor for our benefit. So there will be a knock-on effect. There will be impact on us in the West. But listen, when you hear that kind of stuff, it's infuriating. It's just not fair. You think about the fact that, well, I can't remember the other country where, you know, the country has to pay France, I think it was something like 200 billion or something like that a year or something like that. And then the aid payment that France makes to that country, they're just given a little bit of that money back under the guise of aid. It's so bad. It's corrupt. It really, really is. And that needs to change. All right. I'm really conscious of time, guys. We're an hour and 20 in. So I've still got some editing to do in readiness for the week tomorrow, starting tomorrow. I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining. Juggernaut, again, thank you for that super chat. I hope you enjoyed this. We're going to have a live next week. I will put the thumbnail and schedule the event tonight or tomorrow. But we are going to be talking about the markets, and I do have a guest joining me as well. So it will be great to see as many of you here next week as there are this week. It's going to be really, really interesting. You'll be able to ask questions and have a bit of an interaction as well. But we are going to be focusing on the market's trends. What are the kind of things maybe to pay attention to now in these kind of environments? You know, things like earnings week, for example. What are the things that you look for in earnings week, especially if you've got a certain amount of companies in your portfolio? So yeah, please join us next week. I appreciate every single one of you, and thank you so much for joining me. Whatever it is that you ended up doing for the rest of the evening, make sure that you have a good one. I really do appreciate you. And yeah, I will speak to you next week during the week for a few lives. Cheers.
Surprise, a little different than you're used to. Dropping these bars on YouTube, knowledge I introduce you. We chasing this money like it's the prize, it's the voodoo. Fugazi, fugazi, it's just a lie we buying into. We need some cars on deck. Get the rollies, get the Moe, all the Mars on deck. We got the traders, got the picture with the Bentley in Dubai. Are you dripping in designer looking fly? On the bombardier, sipping on the wine. Broke man, we broke. Where's the fun in being broke? Stocks and bonds get you, yo. That's what I'm teaching these folks. I see that smoke, see them choke. Getting coke. While I'm researching these stocks, buying coke. 20 months on the channel, million people taking note. I got a warrant for Buffet. I'm coming for